Hey, great to have you here. So I know in my prior video I ran through the PC parts that I was looking at buying as a first build and a new PC builder. I kind of highlighted the process I was thinking through as far as what parts here on PC Part Picker, highlighting kind of the direction I was going for with each of the main components of a computer. I have an updated viewpoint of what that looks like today as far as what I did wind up ordering, and I was going to share a few of the items that have come to this point as well. So with that, we'll just kind of jump right into things a little bit different than last time. I already have highlighted what I planned on purchasing and using, so we'll just do a little bit of a comparison to previously and kind of dig into things from there. So at the top here, we have I mentioned previously, Micro Center has this bundle where you have the 3 AMD products for the CPU, motherboard, and memory. So that's really what I wound up sticking with. That's the main piece that I would say is consistent from what I was previously thinking. We have the 7800 X3D. This is the premier gaming CPU at this point in time. I know if you have other functionalities you're looking at, it's questionable if the 7950 may be more optimal, but the 7800 X3D is ultimately what I went with because of that extra bundle we had here. As highlighted last time, $479 is the current price. It can be up to $499, but if you pick it up right now, $479 for the CPU, motherboard, and memory is a great combination. You can see kind of the prices here that if you bought them individually, you'd be looking at more in the range of like that $600 to $650 price point. So that really extra value you get by bundling them all together makes sense, even if the motherboard and memory weren't necessarily ones that I would have selected without a big part of the bundle. So just kind of background there. Those are what I ultimately did go with. The cooler, I debated if it made sense to do a more updated current version of a cooler. I don't think you need to overly spend here from what I can tell. It sounded like this CPU is very efficient and doesn't need a whole lot of cooling to take place. So I stuck with the Peerless Assassin that we covered last time as well. I know there's the Phantom Spirit, I believe it's called, which is the more updated model, but I figured I would look to save a few bucks and order this guy. Actually, on the price on here, it wound up being like $3 less based off the version I ordered on Amazon. So looking at kind of the CPU cooler, those are kind of the thoughts I had there. I know motherboard, memory I covered as well. Those, as far as price points, are tied to that $479 bundle with the CPU. So those are the top 4 slots we've covered already. Moving kind of down here, we have the storage. So this is one previously, without being overly well versed in PC parts, Samsung stuck out to me as a recognizable name. So by default, I had gone with that before with the Samsung 990, the latest model from my understanding as far as the 2 terabyte option for storage. After digging a little bit further and seeing reviews on different products, the Western Digital Black SN850X is what I ultimately went with. Amazon actually has this on sale for $139 right now. So compared to the $169 to $179 that the Samsung was at, it sounded like these were very comparable experiences as far as using both products. So ultimately went with the Western Digital option here. And hopefully, as I said, I don't have experience with this company, but hoping it's a well-manufactured product overall. For video card, this is one I was a little bit torn on. We had previously the Gigabyte Gaming OC. I went back and forth a little bit on this one. When I was ordering the video card, that was currently priced at I think $595. I think it's gone back up to the typical $599, $600 price point on Amazon. Some places it's up to $649. After looking a little bit further, I wound up going with the Founders Edition of the 470 Super. I know there's just various opinions on what people prefer from their graphics card. I had seen that the Founders Editions typically hold up in value over time, so went with that, as well as the kind of the sleek black general look that this Founders Edition card has to it. I know a lot of times people prefer the RGB additions to graphics cards. I think for right now, I'm okay with just using kind of your standard generic, does the job effectively, don't need the extra bells and whistles. But this is one I did debate going back and forth on because the price points wound up being the same at around that $600 price point. If you want to have the extra RGB factors or any of the other extra additions that these manufacturers add to the NVIDIA cards, definitely look at considering those. I know there's other variations, like there's 3 fans on that Gigabyte card compared to the 2 here, so a little bit of differences as far as performance overall, but at the end of the day, it sounds like the 470 Super cards all using the same guts. small differences between variations as far as coil whine you may experience, or temperatures, or performance as well. But in general, it sounded like they were all roughly around the same area. And as I said, the Founders Edition seems like kind of it's a classic option. So going with that one. That one's not showing up till next week, so that's kind of one of the later items that I'll ultimately be receiving here. The case, I previously had gone with the Corsair 5000D Airflow on my list. I had debated the 4000D, but I was wondering if that option was a little bit too small. I know that it would fit the parts I have here today, but when trying to somewhat future-proof things, I wanted to be mindful of what would fit in the case. I don't plan to do much additions in the near term, so wound up going with the Landcool 216. I kind of went back and forth on, as I said, the Corsair option versus the Landcool 216. I also had been looking at the Landcool 3, which is a little bit bigger of an option. I don't think it's necessarily something I need at this point in time. I know at Micro Center they had open box options that were actually relatively similar in price to the Landcool 216 that I got here. But ultimately just stuck with this option. As you can see here, on sale on a decent price point, we have $87 there. This ultimately is the one that is just kind of the standard generic black case. I did not get the RGB here as well. I debated doing so. At some point in the future, I may consider having those extra kind of colorations, but I figured for a first build, it's not something that's required for me at this point, so let's just go with the standard case with the kind of classy black finish to things. Then jumping down to the power supply. This is one similar to the storage where I had gone with, traditionally I had Corsair on the previously company. I was aware of their name. I know Seasonic is in the PC space is relatively well known as well, so not a big stretch switching here, but Corsair had the RM850X, I think I had on there previously. Stuck with the 850 watts. It's a little bit more than I need here. As you can see, the wattage at the top is 500. My understanding is you want to go typically maybe 25 to 40% above that, just taking into account variations. Or if you do want to build in the future, you don't want to have to buy a whole new power supply super frequently. Went with the 850. I debated the 750, 850, or 1000 even, because if you want to totally future-proof things, 1000 may have made sense. But based off the price point here, the Corsair, I know you could get that graphics card I got from NVIDIA. Best Buy had an option where you can combo that with a power supply and get a discount. Debated that at one point. I think that for the 850 Corsair option was around the 120 price point, but the Seasonic here, as you can see, actually was a little bit less when there was a coupon added previously and came in around $95. So even with kind of those extra discounts that you would get on the Corsair, this was still a cheaper option, and similar to the storage situation, seemed to be a well-known, reputable option as far as power supply. It comes with I think a 10-year warranty on power supplies, so they really stand behind their products. So hopefully this winds up being one that winds up being a good product down the road in a kind of a long-term situation. And then finally, I'll cover the monitor. This is one I probably spent the most time recently going back and forth on. What do I want my experience to be? Because you get a certain graphics card, you get a certain CPU, and you want to be able to capitalize on the strengths of those cards. And in doing so, you kind of balance between, okay, how great of a monitor do we need to get here? I went kind of all over the spectrum when it came to options here. I previously had the LG 27 GP850, I believe, which is around that $300 price point. That I think there is around 140 hertz, can be clocked to 165, I think is what the numbers were for that one. It may be 165 to 180, but it's kind of in that ballpark of the 140 to 160 hertz area. I saw a variation of that monitor. It looked like a great monitor ultimately. From there, I kind of bounced a lot of different places. I had seen for a budget option, there was a Dell, I believe it's called the G2427D, something along those lines. That was a very cheap option. I think that was $179 currently on Dell's website. That seemed like a great option. Similar in product, a little bit of pieces that weren't there. I think the audio jack didn't have a lot of output there, so some factors lent me to thinking maybe this makes sense as far as the price point and the quality of the monitor, but some other functionality that I may be looking for down the road is what moved me away from that one. I debated other LG options as well. The 27GR83Q-B, I think, is the one. Would have been a little pricier at the $400 price point, but this is one that had the functionality as far as HDMI 2.1, so really able to leverage that gaming console addition to the monitor. I don't plan to really use that. I mean, I mostly plan to be using PC for the purpose of getting this whole new build, obviously. So that one was very tempting. Having the ability to do things on future gen consoles with the HDMI ports, having 4K visibility was something I was considering, but realistically did not really plan to use consoles on the monitor as much as the PC, which you just use your display port for. So more often than not, that would not necessarily be a big value add for me. So that was one that I was really interested in, but kind of the extra factors didn't feel like something that I was necessarily going to be taking advantage of more frequently. So didn't feel like for the price point that one made a whole lot of sense. I wound up going with the HP Omen 27QS, kind of off the wall. I was really leaning a lot towards the LG monitors. A lot of variations. I was debating, okay, what's the hertz for this one? What's the size of the monitor between 27 and 32? Is it 1440p? Is it 4K? Those kind of variations. I was all staying within the LG family as far as balancing between options. This one came about as far as having some of those great functionalities that the LG has, but at a more reasonable price point as compared to that previous monitor that I had last time, that LG 27GP850. This one compares pretty similarly when it comes to 1440p. The difference is this one comes with up to 240 hertz. So as far as the frame rates you get, from my understanding, especially with a lot of online multiplayer, I'll probably dabble between single player and online, but having the option to have that great of frame rates is something I was interested in. That's why I kind of lean towards that 27GR83Q that I mentioned that LG has, that 400 one, that I steered away from because of the price point, despite the HDMI 2.1 ports. So I wound up going with this Omen 27QS. I think the original price is around the $500 mark. It may be 400 something. I think it may be 430, something along those lines. So $400 to $500 is the standard price. Currently on sale at Best Buy for $300. It seems like it's done this a few times since Black Friday, so I'd expect this maybe continues in the future. But this felt like it had all of the factors that I was considering as far as the importance of a monitor. I would typically stick to 1440p, so this has kind of the optimal ability to utilize that skill set as far as the 240 hertz. Having the various ports that the Dell didn't have is an additional consideration I had. I don't know if it's ultimately going to be something I care about, but I know a lot of the LG monitors, they have kind of that gaming monitor look to them where they have the kind of angled out feet for the legs of the stand. And I know all these you can pretty much, if they meet certain requirements, can be taken off the stands and be put on an arm that you can ultimately handle yourself. But for the time being, I would plan to keep it on the existing stand. But this one seems to be more of a kind of square in a single spot stand option, so that was more appealing. I know they're not the best, but it does also come with things like in-monitor speakers. Obviously, long-term, that's not something you consider using because the quality of those are probably extremely poor, but I think for just hearing something in a short amount of time, that was an extra kind of small value add, but wound up going for this one mainly for the price point. I actually selected an open box option, which was another like $37 off, I believe. I think the total wound up being like $263. We'll see. Hopefully the quality of the open box option is effective. If not, obviously, you can do return a situation with Best Buy, but it was viewed as being excellent condition, so don't expect any issues with it. But obviously, if I do have something come up, this, probably the monitor and the case are the ones that I'm most unsure about. Is there going to be any dings in them or anything like that? Just based off of, those being the more visual things that you see on a day-to-day basis. The other parts, it matters on their performance, but those are going to be more things that are going to be inside the computer that I'm not going to see on a daily basis. So ultimately, hopefully, that winds up being a good monitor option. As I said, it was kind of off the wall at the last minute, but It felt like it had everything I wanted and at a price point that was extremely reasonable given the sale option going on right now. So that's kind of a high level of everything. So as far as kind of differences, we had the CPU, the cooler, motherboard, memory all stayed the same. Storage, we had a tweak there with a more cost-efficient option of the same product essentially. Graphics card, we had the switch to the Founders Edition from the Gigabyte. Case, we switched. They're both kind of viewed as like premier options for first builds, which is just kind of entry-level cases that you can be looking at between the Corsair 4000, 5000D and the Landcool 216. So switched over to Landcool. Power supply switched from the Corsair to Seasonic, and then monitor moved from the LG to the HP here. So hopefully, ultimately what I went with is effective. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below on, are these parts that make sense to you? Is there any that you think I should have steered clear from? But just kind of overall, from a new build perspective or from an experience perspective, depending on kind of your background here, curious on your feedback there. So now let's take a look at some of the parts that I do have today and just kind of highlight the high level what those touch on. So, okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to share a few of the PC parts that I do have today. As I mentioned, the other half of them are going to be coming over the next week or so. So hopefully going to get this thing built and maybe share a little bit more information on the steps I went through in putting it together. So let's take a look at each of the pieces here. As I mentioned, primarily we're looking at the Micro Center bundle that we got. So taking a look first at the CPU here. Not much to really show here. I'm not going to open these up necessarily at this point. When we put the build together, I'll dig more deep into kind of the specific parts and how they each function within the computer and show you kind of the final product of what they look like. But as far as just the outside packaging, here's kind of what it looks like for the 7800 X3D. Well put together packaging, and really looking forward to seeing what the CPU can do. From there, we'll take a look at the biggest piece here, the motherboard. So we have the B650 Gaming X AX-V2. So as I said, I don't particularly necessarily would have picked this motherboard, but I know there's other ones out there that may be more effective or more efficient. But I think as long as you're kind of meeting the minimum standards, this one should suffice. And as far as spending your dollars effectively, I've always been told the CPU and GPU are really the focal points where you want to make sure that you're putting more of your funds towards those pieces. But looks like an overall pretty cool box. I know Gigabyte seems to have that kind of aesthetic of that armored character, kind of looked like that Doom or almost Master Chief type look to things. So cool box overall, definitely the biggest piece we have for today. And there's a lot of movement going on in the box, so I imagine there's a few pieces in there that's going to be a lot of the bulk of what we're putting together when we ultimately build this thing. The last piece of the bundle is the memory that we have here. So just a couple memory cards. I'm going to be definitely having to look up how to effectively, slot these in to the case when we get it. That's kind of the downside, is the case is one of the last things I'm getting. So that would probably be the most effectively looked at thing early on, just to kind of get a glance of, okay, here's where each of the parts are going to go. But no matter, we're ultimately going to get the parts as we come, and then we'll get the case and get things put together from there. But not much to see here, just your kind of standard memory we have here. And then similar, we have the storage cards as well. Similar aesthetic to them. Ultimately going to be opening this up, as I mentioned, when we put this thing together. But here's just kind of a highlight of what I've gotten to this point in time. Let me know your thoughts, as I mentioned. Are these pieces that you would recommend? What's your experience with using them? Or are these things that maybe after watching this, you think, okay, this is something that maybe something you want to order yourself? Just open any commentary down in the comments below. As I said, this is my first build going through this, so hoping it's a pretty smooth process. I know there's been a lot of kind of things to learn along the way. One of the things actually that I have done already is getting a flash drive and getting Windows put on as well. So encourage you, for anyone doing a first new build, look that up. If you've done it before plenty of times, I'm sure you're well aware of how that works, but essentially just putting on the Windows software to prepare for when you ultimately plug things in and get things onto your storage. So as I said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you've done this before, what's your thoughts? Am I in a wrong direction? Am I in a good direction? Any feedback's appreciated. Hopefully this has been helpful or insightful or entertaining to at least walk through somebody kind of going through the process of doing that first PC build. So thank you for your time, and I hope to talk to you again soon. Tri-beams up.